I've been meaning to make a return to Mesmerized. I intended to do so a little sooner than now. In fact, as I don't remember if I mentioned it, but my intention upon entering the graces of Mesmerized, my first ever Hungarian-based metal group, and one that has already lodged themselves in individual space for me of recognition, my intention was to spotlight 6 of their numbers off the 12-track debut album, with another one I believe promised at some point soon. I forget exactly what the date is, but I believe I've seen, at least by mention on their website, that there's a second record in development. I'm looking forward to that. But my intention was to come back to Mesmerized with Hybrid. That was, in fact, going to be the next entry. And if you forgive it, there's been a bit of a lapse of a change of orientation. What started as Fresh Impression Witnesses has turned for these last 2 numbers, Hybrid and Satellite, into Reintroductions. And that's literally the only reason was because I wasn't as happy with the first couple of cuts. Especially since these numbers, upon a couple more re-listens, have really, again, etched themselves well, quite nicely in my mind in their individuality, and points of reference for me that I immediately humor again on first lens. Speaking of Hybrid, the theme of duality. If you're familiar with my work, I've mentioned that before in terms of the humanity within certain rock and metal numbers, the relatability that we might find in terms of, to sum it up best, some pieces might speak on identity struggle or identity struggle in the context of a relation. The field of what duality terms here, it's mostly, I think, relationship skewed. I'm assuming maybe in a romantic, or maybe you could attribute other ones. Again, music is quite broad interpretation. I won't, go the mile of speaking for anybody else in terms of possible destinations of interpretation, but the model of the hybrid concept as applied to Mesmerized work, I think, here is quite interesting, with some good lines, pretty direct ones, but you're going to see in a second, of course, I'm giving you the prelude, right? If you're walking and you've not yet recognized hybrid for yourself, or Mesmerized, that could be a new name for you. They very much are an emerging presence within what I would say, at least to my lens, modern, electronic, maybe progressive. I think those would be fair attributes, and heavy metal as well. I sense tones in that direction. I think you're going to quite like them if they are a fresh debut for you. Or maybe you discovered them through taking the simultaneous journey with me for the first 4 pieces and have been waiting for these last 2 entries. I've been meaning to get back to it, or maybe you've known about them for far longer than me. They've been around for some time, and I just recently got wind of them, courtesy of Amramp's former Unclean singer GG6, right? He's the one that brought me in because of that collab, I forget, Cyanide. Love that song. But there's been some stellar standouts on this album. The last one especially, I love Shutdown. I think that number really clicks. Hybrid, though, conceptually and visualized in what you're about to see, because I have humored the visualizer before, it is quite an interesting piece. Again, like I said, a number with dimension. On concept, on score construction. It's really interesting. I think you'll see that for yourself. Again, I wanted to give it its due, which is why I decided to come back to it. Because there is a lot to consider with this. Some common electronic tones of what I'm consulting today. Funny enough, how certain pieces overlap. But the synth patterns in illustration, they're not identical, but it's a utilized pattern that's effective enough before when I've heard it. By the way, I love the color Dust Clouds. I don't think we've welcomed that before in any visualizer, respect to any group. Maybe I'm forgetting one or two, but this one really stands out. Because there's an excessive use of it, and it's quite excessive, elaborate, delightfully. See, again, the field of interpretation to what hybrid can be speaking to, balancing contrasts, I love that 9. It's a very direct articulation. But well stated. Ice and fire, too. Good opposites of descriptive language. Clear vocals plus differentiation on scale per verse. I really like that. Lower registers for the verse, incline for the choruses. feels like a score and a number that decisionally is designed in spirit of the narrative and title. Speaking of hybrids, you see it everywhere with this song. The instrumental to this one really does stand out in our library on this synth-dominant side. And the pieces we've recognized so far are good. But this one has a great key choice. Perfect balance to a synth. Riff pattern, structurally, it works well. Like I said, it's really interesting to see a song that takes its namesake so seriously in invention, right? You consider hybrid, and it's not just told again in the interpretation of the narrative, like ice and fire, again, as I said, descriptive language examples of polar opposites, paired to the idea, and this is true for a lot of the numbers we surveyed from Mesmerized, there are plenty of pieces that speak on relationship dynamics, at least in the way that I interpret them. And you have never a song that floats that way, but it's evaluated with such interest for me here. Ice and fire, that's the way we started. Like, those types of lines really work for me, and they're instantly relatable. I can think of it, again, I don't want to speak for anybody, but if you've been in a relationship situation, whether romantic or platonic, familial, any orientation of that, any societal context really where there's an evident human bond, whether that's good or bad, right? And this is what the song perfectly evaluates. The language of hybrid, and even the sense of individuality to it in the way that you can read into the lyrics of a song and kind of see yourself in journey of it is really interesting. But it's creatively invented. Seeing the intentionality of the artist to take that model of a hybrid and imbue it into the decisions on where the score evolves. Listen again, for example, the vocal contrast. The lower scales, I forget their front lady's name at the moment, but where she sits in the verses versus the chorus, there's that sharp acceleration on pitch that raises to much higher notes, and then the retreat back as soon as the second verse launches. It's fascinating to see the philosophy of a song and its namesake so directly woven in to the piece. And even that's true with the balance, I would say, between synths and metal instrumental support. You see the duality of each layer clearly. It's well imagined with this one. Again, like I said, the more you consider hybrid as a piece, the more, I didn't notice this at the time, you consider every faculty that the song boasts, and then look at the structure. And as a first-time listen, it's engaging enough as, again, a rock tune. I would speak for myself, and maybe you would agree. Or, again, music is very much a first and foremost subjective experience. So I'm welcome to hearing any interpretation of feedback on how you view this piece down below. But for me, I see a number that is deeply influenced by its namesake and meticulously created. That hybrid sense of duality and balance among the different agents of the song, when I consider it now, it's inescapable. You have to see each layer applied and then the varying contrast. It's usually just in a 1-2 pattern. I don't think it really goes beyond that. Maybe there's a couple you could say that make an argument for, at least in certain areas, that there's a bit of a reach. But again, the 1-2 pattern is very specific. Look, for example, again, the most evident, clear indicator of this, those scales. Seeing the shift between verse and chorus, or even the jumps in instrumental, seeing where the synths are integrated versus that rougher guitar backing. The synths too really work. That bridge transition into the next, the refrain on the chorus, really nice. I love that. It's quite a solid choice. And visually, well presented. Again, I love the colored dust clouds. It's got a fun ambiance to it. It's an interesting song, again, like I said, for a group that's emerging very much with this consideration being a part of their first debut album, and more as promised on the way, whenever that is. It's quite interesting to see the level of insight that was boasted so early on with Mesmerized, and evidently with a song like Hybrid. Again, when you view it now and you see its true nature, it's inescapable to not notice it. I find it to be, again, a very interesting piece, and I wanted to give it its due because I didn't recognize, again, the intricacies to this number in a first encounter. It's a rewarding listen when you approach it superficially, again, unknowing, but when you sit down with it, you start to automatically strip away each layer and see the differentiation. I'm not saying strip away in the sense of being derogatory. I still think it's quite an exemplary piece. Just as an evaluation, you analyze how each layer to this song unfolds and builds to the next section, and why there is this natural transition that you start to see over time where there is that hybrid balance. As stated, balancing contrasts, that's a great way to sum up this song, and I think it was quite effectively managed in doing so, in my opinion. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.